Welcome back to the Marvel Movie Minute, a daily podcast in which we explore the films of the Marvel Cinematic Universe 1 minute at a time. In this, our 5th season, we are looking at Joe Johnston's 2011 film Captain America, The First Avenger. I'm Andy Nelson from the Next Reel Film Podcast. Pete will be back next time. I promise, I swear. It's true. Today, we're talking about minute 45, which begins with Schmidt's offer to show his work and ends with Schneider telling Schmidt he's mad. Back on the show today, sadly for the last time this week, it is the team from the Timeline Scavengers podcast, James Anderson and Colin Parker. Hello.
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 Come on in. Take a look around. It's fine. It's totally safe.
It's totally fine here.
It's totally fine. And it's also not going to get into my brain at the fact that I was first on the list 4 out of 5 times. Then the last second, James suddenly became at the top. Ooh.
I shake things up.
I'm glad we both noticed that.
I was getting ready to do the thing that I did last time, which is like, as my name is being said, be like, hello, just so you know which voice is which. And then you said James first, and it threw me for a loop.
Clearly.
I was like, oh, God, what do I do now?
Now you're backpedaling, and it's going to be
I have to talk backwards this whole time.
Yeah, there you go.
Yeah, exactly.
That'll be fun.
All right, start from the end of the scene then.
That's right.
That'll help me.
All right. Well, we're coming in on mid-word. This is Schmidt. He's kind of like, I know, he had a little bit of a moment in the last minute because Schneider called him Red Skull. He said, your boss calls you Red Skull behind your back. This is really also a great moment right at the start of this minute where you can see as he kind of turns, he's got that huge scar, kind of, it looks like a scar, running from like mid-ear down below his collar. And we slowly start seeing little things like he looks a little less healthy. He's a little more red around the eyes. He doesn't look as crisp as we've seen him in the past. And so I feel like we're getting closer to the reveal.
The big reveal. Yeah.
And I suppose, I don't know, I guess question for the two of you, I don't know where you were with your Captain America comic history as far as Captain America and Red Skull, but when you came into this film, were you surprised that Red Skull was just a regular looking dude as opposed to a guy wearing or with a big red face? Or were you like, oh, well, surely at some point he's going to either put a mask on or take his human face off? What were your expectations when you came into this film?
I definitely was expecting, I wasn't sure if it was going to be a reveal or if it was going to be kind of like, Jack Nicholson's Joker, like turning on screen. Like I wasn't sure if there was going to be some sort of moment. Like, I mean, like, before the mask pull situation, which not to, spoiler alert, I almost expected perhaps the fire in the base to maybe be something that was going to cause some sort of issue, like as things were like blowing up and stuff like that. But because we start to see sort of the seams literally kind of fall off or like kind of like start to tear, things like that, it did start to sort of paint an idea that like we're dealing with a Scooby-Doo situation. But like in reverse, that instead of underneath the Red Skull, it was really Old Man Schmidt. It's that underneath the Old Man Schmidt, it's actually Red Skull.
Which is scarier.
Yeah. Because we are monsters.
Yeah, right.
That's what Scooby-Doo teaches us.
Right. Right, exactly. Yeah, I don't know. I guess I was expecting sort of a Jack Nicholson situation. I don't remember when I saw this. It certainly wasn't right away, but like it did not surprise me when he pulled off his... Well, because didn't we in the flashbacks? No,
we never see it. We have not seen.
We never see it
unless you go frame by frame when he's doing his portrait. Right when he turns the light off, there's a brief hint of kind of the skull face there, but it's already fading out. It's incredibly hard to tell, and watching it,
the biggest flex.
Yeah, you really can't tell. So
yeah, so I guess I just was like, yeah, this guy. Maybe it's a symbolic skull. Oh no, there it is.
Yeah, I mean, I was definitely expecting it because, like, I was never a huge Captain America person, like, comic books wise. And, like, the only thing I really knew about him and, like, his, like, cavalcade of people that he's fought is Red Skull. Like, that's the only, like, person that I really ever, like, to me, Captain America was more like an Avenger. Like, that's all I ever read of him. I don't think I ever read.
Like the first Avenger.
Yeah. No, but I don't think I ever actually read, like, growing up or, like, when I was younger, I don't think I ever read an actual Captain America book. I think I only ever saw him in Avengers books. So like I always saw him fighting whoever their main threat was, or perhaps one of his villains stepping in to try and, do their thing, as, your Red Skulls, your Green Goblins, people like that often do at times.
Yeah, I mean, I never, when they did, I was actually just reading, with my weird system of what I'm reading, like the Heroes Reborn series from 96 or whatever, when they like sacrificed themselves for Onslaught, and like suddenly Captain America, Avengers, Iron Man, and Fantastic Four were rebooted. And so I was like, well, I'm going to get all of these number ones because, when did number ones of these big books ever happen? Because I was much younger and more naive.
Well, that was before Marvel started rebooting it every 2 years, basically.
Yeah. But
really,
so I got Captain America and I read it, and like Colin was saying, like I was like, okay, that's fine. But like like being able to access it through Marvel Unlimited and stuff and sort of really dig in, there's some interesting stuff. But I would especially recommend you go read like early like Captain America comics from the 40s, Red Skull stuff. It is wild, where it's like I'm Red Skull, I have poisoned teeth, or like I'm gonna leave a Red Skull artifact that but like it's all sorts of like, does he have a Red Skull, or is that like his pumpkin bomb thing for Green Goblin? Like, and it's both and it's neither, and it's absolutely
old comics really leaned into gimmicks like in a way that like reminds me a lot of like wrestling, you know what I mean, which I feel like I dig a lot.
Sure, I think, but like this was a situation where it would almost be like he has a Red Skull from the start, and then I think I said this on a recent podcast we had edited, but and he pulls off the Red Skull mask, and underneath the Red Skull mask is actually another like Red person. Skull. Like that was how it was in the 40s comics, where he's like, I'll just leave these Red Skulls everywhere as like threats, but he still has a Red Skull. Like it.
Well, and I mean, the first time it was a decoy anyway. Like he pulls it off, and it is a mask, but it was just somebody else. And so that, and it seemed like comics, they change their minds often depending on who's working on them. But it was like it seemed for a long time like it was actually a mask. Like it was something that Hitler gave him to wear that would terrify the hearts of anyone who saw him. And the whole idea of him actually having gone through some sort of experiment seemed kind of like an afterthought. Like they're like, oh yeah, maybe we should do something like that.
Yeah, redconning.
Yeah. We definitely talked about this in a recent episode for ourselves, where I think it's like the 60s or 70s where they finally decided, no, we're going to essentially retcon it. And from now on, like it was never a mask. Like it was always, this is what his head was. Everything else was a mask or whatever. Like they finally kind of leaned into that, that aesthetic, I guess. But like, I think it's really funny when people are like, well, this is clearly just like not a loophole, but what's the word I'm looking for? Like when you leave like something open-ended, kind of, but like when you accidentally leave something like wide open, like
a loose end.
I'm thinking of a specific term from shows and I can't think of what it is. But either way, the idea though is that, I mean, like a loose end is definitely very close to it, but like I think that people frequently leave those open specifically because then it gives plot hole. That's what I'm looking for. Thank you. I think people leave plot holes and stuff like that all the time because like, even if it contradicts something else, because it's like, that's always where a lot of people jump off. Like whether it's the same writer who's like, I might want to do something with that later, or someone else who's like doing their research because they've taken over and they go, I kind of want to do something with this person. Oh, hey, in 1982, this writer did this, so I can use that, because no one's ever done anything with it yet.
Like when Bendis put Jessica Jones in this old Spider-Man comic, he's like, yeah, they went to high school together. See, there she is. Yeah. And there's just some random girl. Mm-hmm. Fantastic stuff.
That's what we were saying basically for IMDb people to do. I don't know why I put the emphasis so weirdly on that.
IMDb. Do you children still use the IMDb?
Hello, fellow teens. No, but yeah, I love that idea of just being like, yes, this character that shows up for 2 panels, that's this person, baby. All right, That's a fact.
And then try and get in multiple Marvel movies, and then try and flesh out a story in your appearances, and be like, hey, did you know that there's a secret, like make a BuzzFeed article, or like the secret story going on behind the scenes in Marvel movies, make $1 million.
That's why I've been trying to get into movies, and they keep throwing me off the lot. They're like, you know why you can't be in this movie.
We were doing that in Thor last season because there were some actors in New Mexico who had, just because they're New Mexico-based actors, had ended up as different people in different properties, in Marvel properties. And so we were like, okay, so is this person then, by default now, they are a doctor in the hospital, but they are also, I think he was also like, he was one of Loki's people in one of the time loops in the Loki TV show. And so we're like, okay, so is there a way that this could actually be the same person? And yeah, I mean, that's what's fun, is like trying to come up with those threads.
Morita them.
Why not?
Absolutely.
Why not?
Yeah, exactly. To pull a Jim Morita. Yeah, absolutely. And it's also like doing that, but also the guy who in Spider-Man Homecoming says, hey, Spidey, do a flip, is also the guy who's on the bus in Shang-Chi going, hey, what's up, everyone? I'm going to live stream this. And since I did 1 year of karate when I was 6, I'm going to be doing a bunch of commentary and like grading it as we go. And, like,
yeah, exactly.
Assessing it, like, which, super accurate for the internet, but also like really great line and acting.
You tried out for that part, didn't you, Colin?
I did, yeah. And they were like, no, we're going to go with this other guy who's affable.
They actually saw him doing that on the internet, and they stole it from him.
Yeah.
How's that lawsuit going?
Right. He actually wasn't supposed to be in the movie. He just shows up, yeah.
Or we'll put you in a Marvel movie.
Okay. Only if I get to live stream the scene. They're like, ugh, fine.
All right, well, let's come back to our moment here. So
to our timeline, yeah.
We were talking in yesterday's minute about this moment that we have here, the decision point for Schmidt as he's talking to these three. They're walking down a hallway. They happen to be outside of his lab doors. Was he intending on taking them to the lab, or does he, because Schneider called out the whole Red Skull thing, is this point where he says, you know what, screw it, I'm just going to take him in here and get it over with? The fact that he is at the doors, I can see it both ways. He's at the doors. He probably was taking them here anyway, or was he walking them somewhere else and he happens to be by the doors at the point that this whole thing happens with the whole Red Skull nonsense. And he's like, you know what, screw it. I'm not taking them down to see the Valkyrie or whatever. I'm just going to turn in here.
We're going to go to the cafeteria.
We're going to go have some snacks.
So I'll jump in here because this is where my headspace is. I actually don't think that they're directly next to those doors because there's a strong cut to then show them walking through the doors, right? Versus walking like behind them through the doors, they cut to inside for the doors to open, right? So to me, it's, you know, that thing where you know, they have the moment of they have to swim up right before he can throw him onto like, I think that it's an idea of they are close to the lab. I don't necessarily know if they are literally right outside that door because they have to physically turn camera angles, reestablish a new space, and then have them walk through. I have in my head, like what we were talking about yesterday, of like saying, we're just going to give them a few guns and like send them on their way. Like, they'll be out of our hair. They are so inconsequential. Like, they'll never be able, like, this will be nothing, right, to give away this one crate or whatever. The reason why I don't think this was initially part of the plan is because why would you then take them like kind of off in the, like, even if you're walking through the halls, right? Again, it's an underground base. How many different loops are there down there? But like to then walk in through the door, to me, if you were going to kill them, why would you have your big gun under a secret tarp? You know what I mean? Like, he has to walk in and like physically start. He has to take off the tarp. He has to turn the whole thing on. He has to start doing all these calculations. And then again, this is something that I mentioned in our episode about this scene, is I do love the fact that he does a head count when he clearly already knows that. Like, that part is definitely just for him to sort of have fun with it. Like, the fact that he's talking, he's like, oh, 1, 2, 3. Okay, great. Like, clearly knows it. But like, to me, to like literally unveil everything in that way, like, to me seems like, I wasn't going to monologue today, but now is the time, because he even starts going through the conversation of like, he initially is just sort of like, okay, yes, you're here for whatever. But then once they insult him, he kind of starts throwing the shade right back at them, right? Like the way he walks in and he says,
Hitler speaks of 1,000-year Reich.
But he cannot feed his armies for a month. His troops spilled their blood across every field in Europe, but still he is no closer to achieving his goals, right? Like, so he clearly is just like, like, okay, you want to talk about like the failings of people? Sure. I'm going to throw right back at the guy that you're, hailing or hiling here, like to be like, oh, like, and like really kind of start putting it on them. And they're like, and I suppose you still aim to win this war through magic. And like, they're, still talking back, and like, they should realize that he's like, I'm in my monologue phase. Like, you're adding more fuel to my fire, but the fact that Zola is like so nervous in the background, to me, feels like that was not part of the plan. It feels like he's like, oh, why are they here? Hello, hi, we're testing stuff in here. What's, hey, anybody? Arnim Zola here. Hi, what is this? So that was my perspective. I thought it was just sort of like, in a way, like it felt like he was going to kind of be like walk back into the lab later on and give the 1943 version of, that meeting could have just been an email, but whatever. All right, back on track. Let's get this war settled, right? Let's start putting things up to 60% in every factory. You know what I mean? Like, that's what it feels like to me. But then he's like, okay, you know what? All right, Kraftwerk, it's time to take your final curtain call. Let's step into my office.
I'll take the counterpoint.
All right, I like this.
No, but first of all, my favorite Marvel trope is science versus magic. Every time it's brought up, I swear I would love a tally of science is just magic is just science that we don't understand yet versus power and responsibility. I want to see like where's the tally of those, and then maybe like, the powers don't make the hero is a hero, and the power blah blah blah.
Right.
Okay.
The heroes make the power.
Right. Heroes write the comic book power. First of all, I get what you're saying about like taking the tarp off, but I looked at that as part of the pageantry that was continued in the unnecessary headcount, which makes a person think that he is somehow automating the canon, which he is not doing. He is literally being like, I don't know if he's like charging it for 3 people, but he missed. Well, we'll get there.
We won't.
We won't. Well,
I will.
You will get that right.
Yeah,
right.
They will.
Unfortunately, this is where it ends for us. I think that it's funny that it's an obvious canon, and they aren't like, "Hey, what are you doing?"
Well, but remember, he said, "Hey, you want to see what we're working on? I'll show you." So, I mean, he's showing them weapons. I mean, it's this. He's the Tony Stark here, saying, "Here, let me show you what these cool things do."
If Tony Stark was like, "Yes, let me show you weapons, and while I show you weapons, let's talk about how I'm going to destroy my enemies." And they're like, "Your enemies? Look at this nerd over here." And then he's like, "Nerd, huh? Well, let me keep on loading my gun in front of you, and we'll see if you stick around." You are sticking around. Okay, cool.
But again, it's exactly what I was saying last episode, where it's like I think that they've never had the inkling that he would break rank. That's why they're still standing there. That's why they're listening.
I think that's exactly it. To a certain extent, he is them, right? They are all, I don't know his rank, but I'm guessing it's going to be kind of in that same area that they are. And so it's like, we're all working for the same guy, and he's the one in charge. None of us are. We can all squabble and do what we want, but we all have to still answer to him. And I think that at no point have any of these people thought that this is a person who may be thinking that he's actually better than Hitler and is going to actually try to get ahead of him.
Interesting. Because
until they get here and they actually start seeing there are no swastikas, it's all the Hydra logos everywhere. This is a little weird. Like, I feel like they're in that stage where they're like, he's kind of, and it's, I mean, Schmidt or not Schmidt, Schneider says it. He's just like, thank you for making it clear how obviously mad you are.
Mm-hmm.
And I think that that's kind of the point where they've come to, like, this is this mad scientist, and Hitler gave him his own little special playpen because he's kind of ugly now, and he's doing some stuff, and he's supposed to be making us weapons, but we need to go punish him now because he's not doing his job. And I feel like, yeah, I mean, like Colin was saying, I feel like they are here to punish him. In no way or would they expect that he is actually going to turn these weapons on them.
Right.
It feels like they're like, board members of the NRA, and they're going to visit a dude that's like, oh God, Dwight Schrute over here with his gun arsenal and whatever. Let's go visit him. And he's busy taking seriously all the stuff that they're not taking seriously. They're like, we just do what the boss says. We were just following orders. And he's like, but actually, what if I actually harnessed this power of the gods instead of Hitler? Wouldn't I be the god here?
Yeah.
And why would I bow down to you or Hitler at all?
Well, that's also about believing in the power structure. And like, again, like the idea of they see a different force, right? Because like they're looking at the war from what he's accomplishing, not what Red Skull is accomplishing. So to them, they're like, okay, this guy's got great power, great, leading skills or whatever. Like, so we're following this guy because he clearly is the strongest here, if you will, like within quotations, right? The strongest. But like that is this whole thing of, hang on a second, like where, like even though he's kind of giving them a little bit of a speech and sort of insulting their boss, they still haven't fully, like, you know what I mean? Like, I don't know how to describe this, but like, it doesn't really click until he says my enemies and they go, your enemies? Cause they're like, whoa, hang on. Let's check that language, buddy. Like,
right.
That's not, it should be our enemy, or his enemies,
yeah. The enemies.
They kind of stopped to correct him. Right. And like, I think the very first time where there's a real recognition of things taking a turn is when he says, great power has always baffled primitive men, because the two guys who are not looking at the map, they look at each other like, okay, whoa, that one was directed at us. Like, what's that about? They give each other this look of like, why is he coming at us? Like there's this, little moment, but again, like it's exactly what you said of when what Andy said of when like, you're supposedly on the same team and he says, sure, let me show you some weapons. They don't imagine it's going to be turned on them. You know what I mean? Because they're like, we're all part of the same team. Like he's just going to fire at a wall or a target.
Sure.
Or
okay. I mean? And that's and like calling it an obvious gun is not giving them credit because it does turn around and stuff.
Right.
But I still think that I'm fine with that explanation that there was no way for them to be clued in beforehand. That's fine. I don't think there was any way that he was just going to give them some guns, except for they said the wrong thing to him, so he snapped.
I mean, my thought process almost is either he was going to give them some of the, like, just like a crate or two of the boxes, or not the boxes, the guns that they have, right? To be like, I'm going to make it look like we worked really hard on all of this. But really we have this whole arsenal. Or it is literally just like he has two interns making a few things to kind of keep, Hitler and his crew like happy while they're like the rest of the team is doing this other thing. And then he's like, cool. Anyway, we're going to destroy you now. Thank you.
But why would he do that though? What's the reasoning behind keeping Hitler happy?
It bides him time because like he needs a moment.
Well, yeah, it depends on how ready he is.
Right.
Yeah.
Right. Because it's not another 2 years until he literally can get the plane up in the air to go do these things. He's got to buy time to do stuff.
And it seems like, the communication is fairly slow between Hitler and him because, I mean, geez, they just found out that he had invaded Norway, which happened a year ago.
Right.
And so it's a little slow for these things to kind of process, I guess. So, but the thing is that he is revealing now by killing these three guys. Well, we don't know that because we don't see that in our conversation, but presumably something is up. He's acting fishy. they're not going to be returning. And so there has to be some element going on in Hitler's ranks about like, what is going on with these three guys.
And how long do you wait to go, okay, something is up. They haven't checked in. They haven't phone called. They missed their flight, like how long do you wait before you're like, someone's up there?
I just feel like he decided to do this the minute that they put the Tesseract in and it worked. The minute that he did the thing where he's like, let me just crank it all the way up. Good job, Zola. This worked. We can do whatever. We can take over the world now. He stopped kowtowing to anyone in a foreign position of authority over him at that point, in my mind. So anyone that's like, hey, these three guys are going to come for an inspection, he's like, cool, we can run a test.
Maybe, but I mean, I also feel like, so if you want to take over the world, but you're like, I've got to get some bombs ready. I've got to get this giant plane that can fly this great distance ready, right? All that other stuff. You don't want to be also fighting off like an invasion that entire time while also trying to assemble that stuff. So you're like, okay, if we just sort of like make things seem like normal as always, we can just sort of do this thing in secret and build our stuff up. So that way we're not like distracted or pulling our forces or whatever,
But what if you're crazy and arrogant?
I don't necessarily think he's crazy. Is the thing.
You don't think he's crazy?
I don't.
Don't.
Sorry. Okay. What I mean by that is like, hang on. Like, let's consider that. Right?
All right.
Like,
we're talking about the sane Red Skull theory of Colin Parker.
Right.
He is not crazy. Go ahead.
Okay. What I mean more of is that like I don't think he's like the Joker, right? Who is like literally, insane, is like chaos is all that I strive for, right? I think
define
that this
what
is
crazy is then, right? I mean, that's
right. That's kind of what I'm getting at. Is that like I think it's that idea of
I have the power of the gods,
but he does. It's not like some person who's just like, I have the power of the gods. Watch me.
So why would he worry about humans then? If he has the power of the gods, what force on earth can stop him?
Exactly.
So why would he be like, oh yeah, better give him the
because
fake?
He's not ready. He
has the power of the gods. Gods are omnipotent. Why would we wait? We can power everything. And then he's gonna,
because he didn't say he was omnipotent.
He's gonna let's define what God is.
And he might have the power, but he can't wield it. It has to be right. Funneled through all of this machinery and put into their weapons like a little drop at a time, however it works. And they have to take years to kind of develop all of this sort of stuff. So he knows he can't just pick this thing up and start pointing it at people.
Right.
It takes a process. And so that's the thing. It's like, yes, he has this power, but he has to know exactly how to use it. And that's the thing.
But he doesn't see consequences for this, does he?
Technically, I think he does, because in 1942, when he says, like, I forgot the exact line, but when the guy who's Filch is like, you will burn for this, right? He's kind of like, perhaps. He's like, but, he has this line of like, I think he knows that there's a dangerous
I already have.
end game. Haha. But like, he's kind of like, I'm pretty sure I can beat the odds, though.
But I'm saying, like, he kills these three dudes and nothing happens.
Right.
Well, that's the consequence. That how long does the back and forth go on between, like, is he just sending messages? Does he have his stenographer writing notes back to Berlin saying, oh, the Kraftwerk guys are just hanging out here. We're having a great old time. They're up at the spa with some ladies right now. Like, who knows?
Or does he know that since he's a brilliant tactician, does he know that these three guys are no one and I can take them out with no consequences?
That's all very possible.
Based on the ranks, I would assume no. But then I also question, like, why are they sending people of those ranks and not just a messenger boy
or an army?
I think to crack down.
But I guess the idea is they're coming here to specifically crack down, and they're representatives sent by Hitler himself to talk to him and to get things moving. I mean, they basically have come here to say, you've got to get things going. We want to come back with some stuff. That's my impression.
Yeah.
To defend one final thing here is that I realize that I kind of made it seem as though I don't think Red Skull isn't crazy whatsoever.
I know,
right?
I know.
But like I'm thinking, like, if you look at it as like a slider, right? Like, it's a video game, you're creating your character. I don't think Red Skull has it cranked all the way to 100%, because I think there's a lot of like understanding of reality, understanding like, he looks at like these myths and legends and says, I think there's something there. Right. And then he is correct. It's not like it's not like the Tesseract doesn't exist and he is still out literally like ripping his hair out, like going crazy over this, this thing that just eludes his grasp. Like he does now have it. I think that like he's crazy, but like there is like, it is not like, he's not a madman who has lost his mind.
I think he's a megalomaniac though.
He's a scientist who's power hungry. Yeah, he's a megalomaniac. He says, I am smart enough and powerful enough to have figured this thing out. I found it. I conquered it. I am now able to turn it into weapons so I can take over everything. I mean, he really has become somebody. If he wasn't checked by Dr. Erskine and Captain America, the fact that Steve Rogers did succeed in turning into a super soldier, that is the only thing. As he even said, he's like, that's the only thing that can stop us. And he's right. I mean, otherwise he would have been able to take over the whole world.
When does he say that? When that's the only thing that can stop us?
When he's at the at his portrait.
The portrait, and that is before this or after this?
This is before this.
Before this, yeah. Because
so that's the only thing that can stop us.
Yeah.
Okay.
I mean, I think that again, that is about like being smug, being like self-important, right?
Right. So why would he be like, that's the only thing that can stop us, as long as we play the secret, pretend to be meek, long game? Again,
that's just being a tactician.
Why wouldn't he be like, I'm this big guy?
How, like, is 2 years that long of a time to you, though? You know what I mean? Like, in the grand scheme of things, if you're going to overthrow the world, and then, now your power is all power, right? From now until probably never, right? Like, it would never end. Like, you would just sort of hand down the reins to someone, right? Like, 2 years is just like, it's inconsequential to you.
If he feels that nothing else other than Captain America can defeat us, why would he make preparations for other things to defeat him?
I think other things can slow him down.
Okay, he says that he says his serum, meaning Dr. Erskine's serum, is the Allies' only defense against this power we now possess. He doesn't know that. At this point of the film, we're kind of assuming this is roughly the same day. The movie time. Is it the same day? We're saying it's the same day as what we just saw, as far as with Captain America stopping Kruger in the submarine, right?
Right.
So assuming all of that, he has no idea at this point that the experiment has happened.
How many people there are.
And or if Kruger even succeeded. And so he's like, they could, if he isn't stopped, he could have a whole army of people against us.
Right. So, and that's where I think that, like, he understands that, like, if there's 1,000 Captain Americas, that's way where, like, Hitler's forces would, like, slow them down, but they would eventually, win out. But, like, that many super soldiers coming after him, he's like, all right, that's a little bit maybe more than I could. And so, like, to me, like, it's also the idea of someone being crazy in this regard, right? I think that it sounds crazy to us because, like, if someone were standing in front of you and they were like, and they actually had the Tesseract and they were like, and now I'm going to take over the world, right? You would say something along, like, so many movies are like, you're mad, you're crazy, you've lost, right? Like, because to us, that's against, like, our morals and, like, our idea of, like, you can't just do that. Like, that's not how, you know what I mean? Like, so I feel like
it's the Thanos crazy. Like, are you crazy just for thinking that, or are you crazy? Yeah. And yeah.
I mean, like, I guess what I'm saying is, I put the idea of him being like, we'll give these guys some crates of guns to shut them up and so we can keep doing our secret machinations on the same level. And maybe this is where I'm wrong. As if we saw a scene of him on the phone with the Fuhrer and like, oh yeah, things are going great, and just lying and sort of kissing ass. I don't see him doing that. And this feels like that. The idea of him being like, here's your hush guns so that you don't see that we're actually about to secretly take over. I feel like the plan was always, when someone comes, we will destroy them, and we will continue to destroy them until we have conquered the world.
Well, and the problem that we end up with, and this is really where we end up with things, is like the movie time, it's never really well defined unless you go into the Marvel wikis and figure out, oh, this is actually several years of time. Because as you watch the film, it just feels like it's playing out over, it could be days, it could be months, who knows, but it feels like it's fairly quick. So I think a lot of it is just storytelling. Like the filmmakers said, you know what, we need to have some conflict going on between the Nazis and Hydra, so that we can show Hydra being powerful and that Schmidt has this grand vision. By this point, we want to show the audience what Schmidt's up to, and so we're going to reveal a weapon that is going to actually use the Tesseract power.
Right.
And so I think a lot of it is just stuff that, in context of a movie by minute show, this is the sort of minutia that ends up kind of like driving us all nuts, because it's like, why does he kill those three people when he's got years of work to do still, and now Hitler is going to be after him? Like, to a certain extent, none of this will ever make sense, and we're going to end up spinning ourselves down this rabbit hole for a very long time.
And join us next episode for that.
Yeah, and so that's the issue, and so I don't think that there is ever going to be a clean answer. It's just how they've done it, and so we just have to.
And it's how you interpret his whole thing, and it's how. Yeah, exactly. Yeah.
I think the other thing to also kind of look at too, right, is that like the phone call thing for you, by the way, right? Like, imagine he's like, Meanwhile, he's like literally filling out the plans, pointing to some stuff like with an like covering the thing, and then he's like, "Yep, great." He's like, "Yep, we'll send that right over." And then he hangs up and he turns to Arnim Zola, is like, "This idiot," right? And then because it's like he doesn't matter, but like, the other thing to consider here too is that he's also like being genius, because he's just kind of like, doing it on someone else's company dime kind of thing. You know what I mean?
Yeah, I get it. I get it.
But also the fun thing about movies like this too is that like, so you have like the real war in our actual world, right? That we the viewers know about. And so the cool thing to some extent here is that you're like, okay, all of that was horrible, it's terrible, and these are like real stakes. But like then on top of that, like because you're adding this fictional thing to it, you go, okay, but like imagine if there was someone who, if they weren't stopped, like who was in the shadows the whole time, right, waiting for their moment to strike, and then actually show that they could wipe out both sides of the equation like that, right? Like then you realize that like this whole time there's this sort of secondary plot line essentially happening in the war that actually has way more at stake, and really at the end of the day a lot of people will probably never really hear all of the details, because like that's sort of the hero's journey and the hero's sacrifice in this moment sort of thing.
That's why they are able to take a story like this, set it in World War II with, the Allies and the Nazis, and come up with the story that actually works in context of what they're doing, to kind of create this superhero story. And so it's fun. And I like what they do. And I mean, I don't want to go deep into all the other stuff, but I mean, they talk about the 1,000-year Reich, which is a real thing. They talk about the fact that Hitler was struggling feeding his troops, which was a real thing. And so all of this stuff kind of comes into this whole thing. And we've already talked about this a number of times in the show, the fact that Hitler was in fact having troops go out to try finding ancient relics and things, because there was some interest by him and in this sort of thing and what they could do. And I mean, you saw it used to great effect in Raiders of the Lost Ark and stuff. And so,
Hitler searches for relics in the desert.
All of it works exceptionally well in what they're doing and the way they're crafting the film. So,
yeah, absolutely. And listener, I'm not a stick in the mud unless Colin is making a point that I disagree with, and then I will.
No, then at that point you're just crazy.
I stand there and I say, "No, you move." And as I've been told, that's a hero thing to do. So I guess I'm just a hero. No, but I love that the ambiguity is my bread and butter, and that's if you like hearing Colin and I get into disagreements over things that aren't even on the screen, and there's no reason that you would know.
Right.
Timeline Scavengers, like
check it out.
Absolutely.
Fighting over minutia.
Well, this minute ends with, it seems like Schmidt is powering up this cannon, and we don't really know what the plans are, but that seems to be what's happening. Zola's here. We haven't really even talked about the fact that he's here wandering around looking like, glassy-eyed, like, what is going on here? I didn't know you were bringing them in today. It's very funny. But I mean, that's kind of where things are left. We have Schneider calling him out, saying thank you for making it clear how obviously mad you are. And that's where the minute ends. So
indeed.
Gentlemen, it has been a fun week. Something we love doing at the end of the week with everybody is asking what of all of the films or comics or whatever the case may be, what would you say is your favorite Captain America moment?
Wow.
I know there are a lot.
Okay, it's pretty recent, but something that I'm not necessarily sure if it's my all-time favorite. I sometimes struggle with that type of thing because like every day it could change.
Sure.
Right?
Oh yeah, and I fully acknowledge that.
Comics-wise, something that they did very recently is they've split Captain America's title into James, you definitely remember the
Sentinel of Liberty and Symbol of Truth. Yeah.
And so one is Sam Wilson and one is Captain Steve Rogers. And the way that they sort of decide on certain things at the very end of like the book that essentially sets this whole thing up is they both end up fighting the same villain together, and like they do this whole thing, and like they're just talking, they're having a conversation the whole time, which is great because it shows that like this is not necessarily a challenge, it's just sort of like an every Wednesday kind of thing for them,
right?
And they, for a brief moment, they swap shields, and he's like, "Oh, okay, hey, I like this new design.
Nice, yeah, I like this, yeah."
And so like they do that, and then they're doing this thing where they're like, okay, well, what do we think? Like, are we going to go for like, and they're going back and forth between different names that they could potentially use in this regard. And then like they save the day, they win. And then they're just like, hey, what if we were just both Captain America? They're like, why put a weird label on it? Like they both are Captain America. So like, why would they make one of them choose a new name? And they're just like, hey, yeah, sure, that works. And they totally agree. It's like very, like, I don't know, it just shows the caliber of men that they are. And it's a really nice moment that they share together. And I really liked that. I really appreciated that.
James, what about you?
Well, most recently I've been, as far as Captain America goes, I've been going through Ricky Barnes. Have you ever heard? Ricky Barnes is... in the Heroes Reborn universe, she was Bucky Barnes because Bucky Barnes didn't exist in that universe, and she was like Juilliard-trained dancer and stuff like that. So I've been reading a lot of sort of late 90s, early 2000s Captain America, and then also sort of catching up on like Civil War. I know catching up on Civil War is a wild thing to say in 2022, but
yeah,
it's I like Captain America stuff where you think that he's going to go the Boy Scout route, but he goes the route of like, no, that's not what America means to me. It's this other thing.
Right.
Where he keeps going like, this is civil liberties. This is a private, privacy matter. Cause listener, that the Civil War in the movies is over a different thing. The Civil War is in the comic books because there's no mutants.
Right.
And I don't know. I just really like when Captain America isn't just like sort of the, plain yogurt version of a superhero where it's like America, where he's like, no, this is something. I have my moment. Jessica Jones, the first comic, the first Bendis comic of Jessica Jones involves Captain America in a way that is fantastic and is just what I'm talking about here, where he is doing something where you're like, oh, that's not really adding up. And then he basically turns out to be a really cool dude. And that's the kind of Captain America that I really like, is like, he's both the captain of the, he's the president of the class and also a cool friend. And that's where I really like Captain America. So.
He's got some good moments with Spider-Man where he like kind of like lets loose for once. And like Spider-Man also imagines that he's going to be very Boy Scout about stuff. And then he's like, oh, wait, you're actually like super cool to hang out with. And he's like, I mean, why wouldn't I be? I've been known to like, I think he literally says something along the lines of like, I've been known to cut a rug. And he's like, what does that mean? Like, and it's just so clear the time difference. And it's great where he's just like, Steve, I'm so sorry. What are you saying? Funny. And he's like, no, that doesn't. Okay, well, all right.
Yeah. Anyways, there's lots of good stuff out there.
Yeah, there is a lot of good stuff. Check it out. Marvel Unlimited app.
Yeah,
you can check out all sorts of great comics. We've talked about it on the show in our hiatus episode. And it's exciting to kind of check out all these stories. So, well, gentlemen, thank you so much for joining me here all week.
Absolutely.
Talking about these 5 minutes, a great set of minutes. So it was fun.
It's weird to dig into something again and realize that we hadn't unearthed enough of the things about it, because that happened several times.
More,
yeah, I love that. That's awesome. Podcasts.
It's very cool. Gotta love it. Remind everyone about your podcast, speaking of, and where they can tune in.
Absolutely. So Timeline Scavengers is the podcast. It's the show that is designed to last forever. It's the show where James and I go through the MCU in historical order, scene by scene, until the end of time. So we start off with the dawn of time in Thor: A Dark World. And then, we move on to 10,000 BCE in Black Panther, and so on and so forth. Currently, we're in 1943 with Captain America.
Look at that.
Yeah, look at that. Look at that. That's exactly where we are right now. And we're moving through, going in that direction. And, we'll be in the 90s next year. So that just sort of shows where we're at right now. And again, all of our links are in the show notes for this show.
But just real quick, I just want to say, when we have new stuff, like if you go to a movie and there's like a flashback and you're like, how is Timeline Scavengers handling this?
Right.
We will cover it and put it in the newest point of the feed, and then kick it back to where it goes in the feed. So don't worry about, just if you subscribe to our feed, you will get all of the things. We had it going differently initially, but we have this thing where it's like, you're going to get the new episodes, even if they exist and they're like pickup episodes in the past.
Right.
Thrown in there somewhere. They squeeze in.
Exactly.
So they'll end up popping in. Yeah.
Exactly. And
so like Ms. Marvel currently is the most recent example of this. There was 5 scenes, I believe. Mm-hmm. That were flashback scenes, and so we covered them, and they're being edited, and then like they're going to be published, and then they after a week they get pushed back into the actual spot in the timeline.
So then, if you're listening through that way, it'll show. Yeah,
right.
So if you start now,
it is.
They will be where they happen,
right? Right, because especially if you go on all through of 1931, which it's a good time, but it is 60 episodes, so yeah,
it is long. Yep. So.
So anyway, check out the show in the show notes, and you can tune in to that along with anything else over on their network. So a lot of fun. Both of you, thank you so much. It's always a pleasure to jaw with you about all of this crazy stuff. Cutting a rug, jawing, all this sort of stuff, right?
Appreciate it.
Absolutely, really, dancing. Sometimes people just use the word, all right? That's not old-fashioned. That's just... Peggy Carter says it, so whatever.
Yeah. Anyway.
Yeah.
She's great.
All right, you two. Well, I appreciate it. Hopefully we'll have you back next season to talk about the Avengers.
Yes.
Moving into something else. And that's it for this week, everybody. So thanks as always. And until next time, true believers.
Marvel Movie Minute is a production of True Story FM. Engineering by Andy Nelson. This season's music is Spread the News by Anthony Vega, and this season's show art is by Winston Yabo. Find the show at truestory.fm, and if your podcast app allows ratings and reviews, consider doing that for this show.